Fedora was amazing Linux distribution, which kind of worked wonderfully with my AMD configuration. So I had that Fedora setup for about a year, and even till date. I mean, like even when I did that video, my scanning of old negatives video. You remember that? You could recollect that? Yeah. Even till that date, that machine was working with Fedora. It was installed back in 2017 or so, and it was working till then, like 2020. It had no issues at all. My dad had the desktop machine after I got this Mac Mini, 2014 late Mac Mini for me. So I was using Linux operating system, Fedora. It looked something like this. It had a GNOME or a GNOME GUI, a graphical user interface. Something looks like this. This is GNOME GUI. I tried to install a Fedora Linux with my Parallels desktop here to show it to you guys, but unfortunately, this wasn't working properly with my computer's graphics, because this is integrated graphics memory of the Intel, and it's not discrete graphic. Doesn't my late 2014 Mac Mini doesn't have a discrete graphic, so it all relies on the RAM that you have. So it kind of slows you down too much, and the interface is not that smooth. So I couldn't show you that. So hence I kind of opened a web page to show you this. That one has a Cinnamon GUI, Cinnamon graphical user interface. This one is GNOME. This is how my desktop would look like. Okay, so it's all Mac-like, and it was very smooth. Linux is amazing. The graphic driver also had a wonderful rapport with my graphic card, so it lasted for a very long. Machine would not heat. So the only problem I had was like the hard drives was like a decade old. It's all mechanical hard drives, and it runs at about 5400 rpm, so it's very slow. So if you want to edit heavy image, huge image files, so I used to have a habit of testing all the medium format camera images, all the Mamiya Leaf images, all the phase 1 medium format camera images, the monochrome, the color version, and the Hasselblad images. That's when X1D, not in 2016, 2017 or 18, I don't remember, but that's when X1D got launched. So I was testing all that big files as well. So it may not handle that pretty well. It will slow the machine a little bit, but it will take the output of such huge files as well. So those raw images won't be bigger than 250 MB or something. So it will be less than 250 MB. Why 250 MB? I'll talk about this later in this episode. So I was happy with Fedora Linux. So I had softwares like GIMP, Darktable. You saw the GIMP before, right? So GIMP is more like a Photoshop environment. So you bring in an image, you have the tools like selection tools, all the cutting tools, and you have the layer based working environment here, and you have the adjustments, you have all the filters that is there in the Photoshop, something similar, or if not better. And you can even add scripts of Python, and they have a repository in online repository wherein you can source the scripts and add the plugins to your GIMP this thing, and you can build and you can modify and customize it to your requirement as much as like Photoshop itself. The problem is like a problem I found with GIMP is like I was able to edit my photographs and everything, but GIMP could handle only 8-bit files. It may not be able to handle the complete data that is there in the raw image. It can process raw data. It will process through a different software of GIMP this thing to process the raw image. Then it will import it into the GIMP environment as a 8-bit TIFF file, and you can proceed editing with that. 8-bit TIFF file will have only certain information that is needed. You may not be able to bring down the too much of clipped highlight, or too much of clipped shadows. Like you may not be able to do all that thing. So my problem with GIMP was like applying filters was too slow. It will take a lot of time, and you may not be able to have find the live update of the filters, like it will take too much time, and it will handle only 8-bit files. So that's where I was more trying to be dedicated to only one software. That was Darktable for me during my Linux operating system days. So I had Darktable is something similar to Adobe Lightroom that you will find, or even other softwares that you will find in the market, like Capture One or On One Pro or Skylum Luminar, or even CorelDRAW has the image editing softwares that you will find. Like these are raw image editor, raw converter, that what people would call it. Lightroom is a raw converter, right? But besides, Adobe has Camera Raw for Photoshop. If you don't have a Lightroom with you, when you are trying to import raw images into Photoshop, it will open Camera Raw. You process the image for the basic information, then it will import it into Photoshop as a 32-bit TIFF or 16-bit TIFF image, or a 8-bit TIFF image according to your requirement. Okay, so I was using Darktable for all my edits. Okay, so this is the opening look of a Darktable. Whatever you see here is the images that you have in that particular folder. So you could bring those images, click those images, and start editing them. So you'll have this interface will have the import and all the usual stuff that you will find in the Lightroom and everything. And this one has the export tabs here, what and what sizes, what format, where to add metadata, to erase metadata. It had everything that is there in the Lightroom, if not better. Actually, it had styles, presets that you need, and everything. Okay, so this is the TIFF file which I scanned of the negative. Okay, this is much bigger. Actually, this was scanned during the time when Catalina was not updated in my Mac. Okay, so it took 32-bit softwares also. So Epson flatbed scanner was able to scan this image. So it was scanned with that thing. So you bring this to the darkroom. They call it Darkroom here, so that's where you do all the image editing and stuff. So if you want, you can have this open. Mac version has some glitches. Okay, few things may not work immediately. You might have to do them various iterations. Keep trying it. So you have the histories here, whatever things that you apply to the image, all the tasks and everything. So trust me, this image was not looking like this before. I'll show you how. So you will find a watermark here. Let me take that off. And if I remove the spot removal and sharpen, you will find the other dots and stuff that you will find in this image. You see that exposed paper, this. So I was trying to use the spot removal tool to clean that up with this image. I even brightened my father's face with the colors and everything. I did apply some color correction here. You could find the blue color in this image. So basic color curve, if not for the color curve, like luminosity, the light adjustment, color curves and stuff, the crop. This was the actual scan. So the crop of that thing. So it has all the adjustments that I did to it. So Darktable is something like Lightroom, which does some non-destructive image editing to your images that you want to edit. So it was everything fine and beautiful. Okay, so until then your image doesn't have too much of editing to be done with. Okay, this was a much cleaner image to edit with. Per se, though I had spot removal tool to use to remove these flares or the damages in the negative. This is much a cleaner image. If you happen to find certain areas which has some problems wherein you want to remove certain crowd or that particular bird, or you have some plastic waste lying around in the water or in the ground, or you have something on the face of the people, like when you have the area of applying the correction is very small, you will find it difficult with the dark table. That's where I also found my problems with. So all this thing that you see here is the path of the spot removal tool. You have the traditional circle ones here. It applies much more like the patch tool that you will find in Photoshop. Okay, so what it does is like it finds the similar kind of portion in the same image and try to replicate that in the spot which has some damage that you want to correct it, and it applies it with a feather. So the circle, the dotted circle is the feather, the circle that you find is the actual spot removal tool. And this is some custom shapes that you want to draw, you know, when you want to use this tool. Okay, so you have all these different shapes, okay, elliptical, circular, and all the custom shapes and everything. So the problem with Darktable, which I found, is like, suppose I have applied this spot removal correction. So you have a plate or an image that is a layer of image that is there, which has all these corrections and everything. And if I want to build over this image, say like I want to add something to this or subtract something to this or make some further changes that I needed to this image, you know, from whatever that is there right now, it doesn't have layers. Suppose like if I want to add more spot removals to it, Darktable allows about 50 spot removal stuff for one particular layer of spot removal tool that you want to use. So if I want to have various instances, or if I want to duplicate this particular effect on my image, I can duplicate that as much as I want. Okay, I can even delete, rename, and everything, but I cannot build upon that layer. So it's always happening in one particular base layer, okay, the background layer that you have. So everything, the color correction, the sharpening, the whatever spot removal that you have done, and everything that you have that you are doing, it is happening in one layer. So you cannot build upon that. Suppose like if you want to use some content aware fill or any kind of sort of other patch tools that you want to apply, say you want to remove this you know, that whatever that separates this water and everything, you know, you may not be able to do that after this cleaning. Okay, you might have to export this image as a TIFF or Targa or any other higher image format into 16-bit or 32-bit or 8-bit that is comfortable for you, and then bring back that image inside Darktable as a clean plate like this that you have here, and start working upon that. So every time you export your image, the quality gets degraded. So I had that trouble with that with Darktable. And in case of applying the color correction that I was talking about with the tone curve or whatever, you know, like if I'm going to mask my tone curve or do some adjustments with the tone curve, you know, like suppose this is basically the color corrections that I'm talking about. So if you're using masks, okay, so you could actually draw the mask that you want to color correct and everything. Okay, so suppose like I want to choose this and I want to change the color of this particular portion of the hand. Okay, so you saw me draw that mask. Okay, what happens is like it replicates its effect as a path. It's a path. Okay, it's a path with the feathering path. Okay, it's a curve, basically a curve, a bevel curve, and it has a path and a direction and a flow, and it works with that path. Okay, it's not like the brush that you use in other software, say in Lightroom, or in case of masks that you use in Lightroom or Capture One or in Photoshop or any other tool, you know, like you don't use the mask. I mean, like you apply once the brush, you know, you swipe once and it works, and you start building over that layer. If I'm going to apply this here right now for this, you know, to that much, that's it. And if I want to do any extra changes, I might have to export this into a different image, bring back inside Darktable and work on that plate. Okay, so it doesn't have layers. You can have multiple instances of the same effect. Say you can have 3 to 4 levels, or 5 or even 10 levels. I haven't gone that far, but I do not know if it can do that much. But you can multiply levels as much times that you want to apply to the same image, but you cannot. You are applying it on the same base background layer. You're not applying it on a different layer. You can't even copy this base layer. Okay, you can copy the image or duplicate this image in this the import environment here, but you cannot apply it on the same image. Do you follow? So hope you, if for the people who have worked in different platforms, might understand what I'm saying. So Darktable is amazing non-destructive image editing software, but it has limitations like this. It has other limitations as well. So other limitations come in terms of panoramic images. You cannot edit panoramic images in this. Say like as in Lightroom, you select 4 to 5 images from the tool set that you have, from the imported bar. So you select 4 or 5 images, right click and say create panorama. You can't do this in Darktable. And if at all you want to try editing panorama images in Darktable, you have to do it in different panorama stitching softwares which are available for Linux operating system. There are free softwares, and you can even buy a few softwares as well. I did try them. I did not buy as well. I did not buy any software for stitching. The free softwares were working amazing for this panorama stitching and everything. So I was stitching my images from the free panorama softwares, which would limit the number of stitching images to 5 or 6. And so a few free image stitching softwares like panorama stitching softwares would allow up to 10 images. So there is a limitation and the cap on that. And if I stitch the image and try to bring back that image inside Darktable, that image has to be downsized under 250 megabytes. It has to be a JPEG, and it has to be less than 250 megabytes. If it is over 250 megabytes, Darktable would crash, even in Linux as well as in Mac OS. So Darktable would crash. It's not for the panorama game at all. I even emailed and discussed this with one of the key developers of Darktable, and through their blogs or forums, I don't remember. I think it was email. I even shared that email content with my Facebook page of Krish Arts and Photography, wherein I would tell like they were having no idea in the future also to include panorama and panorama stitching inside the Darktable. Okay, so open source softwares are limiting themselves to certain things because there are limitations of patents. Okay, the people, the Adobe or other companies which own the softwares for them, the facilities and all the extra things that the software can do, AI stuff, all these things have been patented before. So because of which the open source softwares and these companies or developers or these software that you see, they are limited to certain features in their softwares because those are patented already by the companies which are selling their products. So they may not be able to include or improve their versions of software with certain features, feature additions like panorama. And if Darktable cannot do panorama, what else it can't do? Image stacking, focus stacking, all that stuff it cannot do. Even HDR, image editing, it cannot do. Maybe for one image, but it cannot do 2 or 3 images. Okay, so those were the shortcomings of Darktable. But the excellent thing about Darktable is like I think I have the folder somewhere here. Yeah, you see this XMP file, that is the data file created by this Darktable, which is like 6 KB. That's it, nothing more than that. It's only 6 KB and your raw file. So the output image that you took, that would amount to 10 MB. So your raw file image size, say like 24 or 25 MB, your output image size 10 MB, so 35 MB, and your XMP file size, which is very minimal, 6 KB. So that is going to be the entire file size of the post processing of that particular photograph. Okay, when you are using Darktable. And If you want to use any other external plugins or anything, you might have to export it as a TIFF and then import it into that particular package. I was talking about the Nick collections of Silver FX Pro or Color FX Pro or Sharpening Pro, HDR Pro, whatever. That's that kind of softwares. Okay, so it's still possible to use them unless and until they are in the plugin form of Photoshop. So we might want to export it as a TIFF file. Okay, so as such with Darktable, everything is very clean and very compact, and it's very fine. But the shortcomings are like you can't do panorama image stacking. People who are doing astrophotographers may not be able to use Darktable for stitching and everything, and people are doing product shots, and people are doing interior architectural photography, or even architectural photography. If they want to stack their image or do focus stacking, they cannot be able to do that. HDR, of course, HDR editing, and may not handle the panorama images as well. So these are the shortcomings, and I personally took up the problem with the masks tool. Like it forms as a path, it doesn't form as a brush. So that also has a problem. So when you and it all happens with the background layer. It doesn't have multiple layers of the image where I can build upon my edit to and put that data, stored the edited data into that one particular small XMP file. So that thing. And another advantage of Darktable which I found was like when you are into the import area of your images from a particular folder, right? Darktable doesn't create a separate folders of that particular stack of folder images for creating the thumbnails. Okay, like Lightroom or Capture One or Skylum Luminar or On1 Pro or any other modern softwares that you use till date, because of the advantage of the hardware acceleration they have, like the RAM and new Intel processors, the speed and everything. These software people are trying to reduce the size of the actual raw file and put them as a thumbnail, up to 512 by 512 or 1024 by 1024 sizes, according to the software they are writing, so they would limit the thumbnail size to that much. So so if you are inside this finder, suppose I'm here, and if I want to increase the thumbnail, this one goes up to 512 by 512 inside the inside the Mac OS. Okay, from basic 64. So like that, it kind of keeps a copy. It doesn't keep a copy of the same images as a thumbnail, so which will add up to your hard disk space. Okay, that will take 1 GB or 2 GB for that particular photo shoot or wedding shoot that you have, just for the thumbnails. It doesn't do that actually. So that's one of the advantages, and it loads faster, and it kinds of works good for about 100 or 200 images inside your folder. If you're going to have more than that, the thumbnail would take some time to appear on this Darktable window, the import window, because like it's an open source software. It works on OpenGL. It doesn't use the complete utilization of your drivers on or complete utilization of your graphic drivers. So that's one of the shortcomings, but the advantages is like it works with minimal sizes and stuff, so it's very fast actually in that thing. So even till date, I use Darktable to apply the watermarks and to apply the borders like this. I use Darktable for all that thing. With Darktable, the advantage is like if I'm going to go and change the crop of my image, say like this and like this, okay, the border will automatically adjust to that size of the image, as in Lightroom. So unlike Photoshop and everything, you might have to use the action, and you have to create that set of actions for each size of crop that you are doing, right? So That's the thing. Hope I'm not confusing you guys. Okay, so grab whatever you can. Okay, I'm going to talk about whatever that is there, the software history, kinds of software that I used when I started photography. Okay, I was very clear about using genuine software. So Doctable was serving my purpose and it was fine and good, and GIMP was useful whenever I needed, and it was slow and it could do only 8-bit images. So I had the requirement of panorama, though I was not doing any astrophotography for image stacking, or I was not shooting any HDR stuff to edit them, or and these kind of stacking also required, because like I was using few bracketing shots, either exposure bracketing or other sorts of bracketing that you have, like, so I was trying to edit those images as well. So those were the shortcomings of Darktable. So after using Darktable, and I was thinking about using something which would require where I can do all that panoramic stitching, image stacking, and focus stacking and stuff like that, and which can handle larger file size, and where I can stitch more number of panoramic images, like more than 10, like. So that's when I thought, like, okay, I would go back to Photoshop and everything, but something was still holding me up, and I did not give a try for Photoshop. Though I installed the Photoshop and Lightroom trial versions, it was back in 2018. I still used that for some time, but I wasn't much happy with that, because like I was using a much older machine, like 2014, late 2014 Mac Mini. So this late 2014 Mac Mini has only integrated graphics, so no hardware acceleration. So kind of slow down my machines when it kind of loads all the thumbnails and everything, in one single window. So I was not satisfied. I was still looking on the internet and everything, where I could find a software which could do all the necessary stuff that is required for me, and wherein I can do all these things, and with my older machine, and want that to be running faster as well. So by that way, I narrowed it down and found out that I cannot be using a software which will load all the images that is there in my folder. So I have to do it one by one. So I have to bring that image into my software, edit it, and take it out, and go back, save the file, and go back and bring back the another image for editing. So I need a software like that. I also need layers. I also need to use brushes for erasing a few unwanted elements in my images, if like sensor dust, or some plastic waste, or some unwanted crowd, or like birds or anything, insects or anything, some flares. So while talking about the flares, I'll tell you about that as well. So I was looking for such things. I was downloading various softwares which I just listed to you. I was trying everything. I was not satisfied either with the software, or with the speed, or with the price of that software, or because a few were in subscriptions and few were like single one-time purchase stuff. So when I was doing all these searches and everything, I ended up finding my Affinity Photo. So Affinity Photo is amazing image editing software. It has all the basic stuff. It's not complete, like it has doesn't have all the tools as in Photoshop and Lightroom. Like they are the industrial leaders as far as now, I would say, though people opt for different softwares like Capture One and other image editing softwares, Iridient Layer and other image editing softwares for different raw processing capabilities. For Fujifilm, separate softwares, and few other medium format image editing softwares and like that. But I would still consider Affinity Photo to be very good, like for my use, at least for my use. That's how I arrived at Affinity Photo. So while Affinity Photo does non-destructive image editing, it doesn't damage your raw file. Number two, it has layers, as you can see here. Can build upon layer. I can copy my background layer, work on it, and it has healing tool. It has in-paint brushing tool. In-paint brushing tool is something like content aware fill. You draw a patch. It will the AI will do the filling for you. This in paint brush tool of Affinity Photo or something like that, wherein I don't have to draw something, for the patch and everything, with my mouse or having the vacuum tablet and everything. All I have to do is just brush like this. It will fill the layer. I can fix the opacity, flow, hardness, width, everything for that. Can increase, decrease, all that I can do. I still have my healing brush, don't forget that. And I have the clone stamp. So I had all the basic stuff that I need to work on. So where does Affinity Photo falls in short is like the warps, the perspective corrections. So it only gives you the four corners, doesn't let you adjust inside the image. Okay, so that's where it falls short. I for now, as much as I discovered right now. Okay, so other things what it had